Okay, so I had a bit of an epiphany. Instead of using the tube with a small wire through it to anchor or to couple the road railers together, I thought about it and I figured brass wire would be better. Originally I thought a stirrup step would work, just a rectangular thing like this, but if one road railer happened to slide all the way to one end and the next road railer was coupled somehow and it slid all the way to the right side, this being slightly exaggerated because they're not done, but this one could be that far and this one could be that far, and it wouldn't look very realistic going down the track. So then I thought of a V shape, so the spike would always be down in that center position. Well, that was okay, but in case the trailer does need to move around a little bit, I didn't think the V would be as reliable. It would have to be a really shallow V, and that wouldn't quite work because I need to get at least the spike head above there. So I wanted something a little bit better, and then I thought of the semicircle, just a piece of brass wire bent around a plastic tube or a paintbrush handle, whatever provided the right diameter. And that would, hopefully this will let the road railer kind of shift side to side if I need it to, or if the track work needs it to, without derailing either one. Now, because these are so light, I don't think it'll take very much lateral force to push it off the track. So I think like in a pulling configuration, this will want to pull this one off to one side or another, like a string lining thing. Like if they're at an angle and something hangs up on this end, it's going to want to do that, and it's going to shove this off the track. So that was my epiphany about the coupling here. So the bumper will still be pretty much the same. I thought I could just drill out a hole, and I'm going to make that more square. And then the coupler would kind of hook in there underneath the brass wire. But this little round protrusion would fit inside the bumper, hopefully, to where it would couple together. It would look like it coupled together close, but it could also slide in and out. There's plenty of clearance. So this is what I'm going to do, and this is just 20 thousandths brass wire, something I had laying around, and I bent it around the size of tube and the original one, the bigger, which is 5/32 diameter. That's this little bit of tube right here with the hole drilled in it that I was going to stick a brass wire through to make like a little lip. So instead of filling with all that, 20 thousandths wire, I believe I used a 20 thousandths, maybe a 21 thousandths drill, and just drilled in. I was careful not to poke through this side of the shell because it would interfere with the floor fitting in there, and I definitely didn't want to poke through this side because it would be visible. So just going slow and steady. I decided to put the wire loop back this far because that's about where the spike will reach in to couple onto it. And one thing about this, one leg is intentionally longer than the other because it's easy to get one leg in and then to move this one around and put it in the hole. The holes are only, that deep, like maybe 100 thousandths deep, not very deep at all, for no reason. And you see just a little bit of slack there. With my original one, there's quite a bit more spike sticking out, so there's more slack. And that will be fine-tuned, I think, later. It's kind of hard for me to figure out what to do until I need to do something. So we're going to continue on with this. I'm going to use this as a template to make another one. This is 5 thousandths, that's too thin. What is this? I believe these are just 10 or 15 thousandths. Yeah, 15 thousandths styrene. And let's get a measurement this way. The height is 150 or so. It's not a critical dimension, but hopefully it will help me pick out a good size if I have it. Here's all the 15 thousandths. So I have 250 thousandths in a 1/4 inch or 80. If I went up to, and this will work fine, I'll just have to trim off a little bit. But what if I went up to a 20 thousandths thick strip? 125 is probably a little too narrow. Let's grab one of these. Yeah, it's not even going to be big enough. It's close though. It won't be big enough for that hole to fit through and provide the strength, but it is 20 thousandths. Yeah, so I have 30, 20 by 60, 20 by 100, 20 by 125, another 20 by 60. If I go up to 30, I'm looking for 150 thousandths wide, which would be 150 thousandths, 156, 140. Yeah, I don't think it'll work very well. This thicker stuff, 40 thousandths, if that was on that bumper, yeah, that would stick out way too far. I could trim these little things down, and it's just to save me trimming off a bit. I'll stick to the 15 thousandths because that seems to be just flush with this rear bumper. Let me check this other shell. Yeah, it's going to be completely different. But it's close. Okay, so I'm going to try this strip. Seems to be a good size. Make sure I have the shortest one. Yep, there are no really short ones. I don't want to keep taking the longest one and cutting it down because then I won't have a long piece if I need it. This is definitely too wide for that bumper. And it goes all the way down there. I'm looking at a reference. It looked like it was fairly narrow. The square is the receptacle for the front coupler. And I'm not using a square, but I want something similar like that. Yeah, this is big for the drawing, and I believe this is an S-scale drawing. So I'm going to have to trim that down for sure. Yeah, this is even probably scale-wise, it's too wide. So for HO scale, it really should be narrower. But then I won't have the clearance. Well, to test out my idea, let's try to use this 20 thousandths by 20 by 125, 1/8 of an inch. Make sure this is the shortest one. Here's one that's a little bit shorter. I'll grab that. And 20 thousandths. Must have been using this as shim earlier. I'll put that in the put away pile. Alright, so this is 125. That's going to be just barely big enough for that smaller rod to fit in. And I'm rethinking this idea. How thick is it? Yeah, it does stick out in front of the bumper. Yeah, I don't think this is going to work. Go back to the original idea where I'll trim this down to a good size. I'll start with this thickness here. Or this width. I'm just going to quickly trim this off. Just a quick light scribe and a snap. Now if this is 250, I want about 150. I wonder if I could just cut that in half and get 2 out of it. I might try that. I've noticed this pencil starting to get dull, so I'll take my plastic only file. Plastic only is really meant as soft material only, and graphite is very soft, so it won't mar or nick up the teeth on the file. So I just want to drag this across here a few times until I get a nice sharp point on that pencil. While I have this in my hand, I'll clean it off so it'll be ready for the next time I need it. It's always nice to pick up a clean tool rather than a dirty one. Although typically dirty tools in the hobby workbench isn't a big deal. It's when you get into a carpentry or machine metal shop that things get covered in chips and oil and all kinds of stuff. Alright, so I'm going to put that off to the side, and I'm going to look for my scale so I can find the center. Here it is. Little plastic bits. Yeah, you know, on some tools, like cutting tools, sharpness and high quality, high quality isn't as important as with a measuring tool. Buy a really good measuring device, whether it be calipers, which this isn't super high precision, but it works great. But with something like this, you definitely want to get something high quality. So it's 125. I think that's about right. Set that to 125 and just tighten that up. It doesn't have to be very tight, just a little bit of friction will keep it from sliding. And the jaws are pretty parallel. This one's a bit lower, so I'll use that. Okay, so with a light scribe, this doesn't work as well in plastic as it does for metal, but it does kind of polish the surface a little bit, so I can see a shiny line in there in just the right light. So what I'll do is I'll try to position this and move my head around to where I can see it. line that up. And I just thought of another way that might be better. I can use a strip like this. That's 125. Perfect. Just need a nice sharp straight edge. I can butt that up too. Just want to make sure that bottom piece is slid all the way to the straight edge. Oops, not too far. Make sure that's 125 thousandths. There, that's a perfectly parallel line there, or edge to cut up against. It's going to be a little tricky to hold in place, so let's try to use a little temporary clamp. If I could tape this down just like that, that'll make it better, because now I can push this block with a finger up against this edge here, and as long as I keep the knife vertical and pressed into the edge of this plastic and press down, I should get a nice parallel scribed groove that I can snap off here. Oh, it looks crooked. Let's see. Yeah, that one looks crooked, so that didn't work very well. So we'll try it again. I like the idea of using another strip to make this parallel. So I want to refine this idea if I can. And if it doesn't work very well on this attempt, then I will try something different. Maybe this block is too thick. So if I use another strip of styrene, this is angle iron, or angle styrene. The same thing, I'm going to hold this angle tight to the sheet that I'm going to cut, and that's just going to sit there. As long as I keep pressure up against this fence, it should make a straight edge. And once again, it didn't. It's not too bad, but not nearly as good as I want it to be. So we'll go with the old tried and true method of simply measuring and cutting. That's where I like to try new things. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. If it does work, that's great. I just learned a new way to do something different. In some cases, one technique works better than another. And if it doesn't work out, then I at least have my old tried and true method to rely on. How about we do kind of a meld of the two. If I slide that there, move that there, and just make a mark. Slide that there. Well, I kind of like this. This is okay. This strip is pushing down, is flexing. This 15 thousandths down to the surface of the workbench. And if I can hold it all down without cutting the tip of my finger off, Third time's the charm, right? Oh, that looks much better. I'll support it right underneath the cut. Kind of flex it just a little bit. And we can easily see, yeah, it's only off by 5 thousandths or so. It's not bad at all. I think that will work just fine. Clean up the burr here. There we go, that one feels good. This one. I'm kind of working the burr over onto itself, and then onto that surface. The first one I did, I just tried to go straight for the burr, and half of the burr folds over on this little thin edge, and the other half folds over here, where it mushrooms out equally. It doesn't work out as well as if you do it this way. If you go slow and steady, you'll start with that flat edge, and then you round it over to the wide edge, and that burr will just come right off. Okay, so we have the thickness. Now, how about the profile? This is going to be a little different because you know, the width is obviously different. Let's try to get this profile down. I guess this isn't a super precision edge, so if I just eyeball it, should be close enough. I guess ideally, if I was going to make a template, I'd make it out of something thicker than this, so it holds its shape better. I've added the circle there just as a guide. You know, that's about the center. All right, so I just want to use this as a parallel, so I can cut this off to a good length. Don't want to cut the scale though. There we go. And I bet I could probably set up a little fence. If I have it at the right angle. Once again, using this established cut line in the tape. Can chop that off there, and then if I flip it over, yeah, see, it's going to be the wrong side, so I have to flip it upside down. And how far did I go? I went right to the edge of that plastic, at least from my perspective. So we'll go right there. Yeah, not bad. Those two pieces of scrap are about the same size. Yeah, not bad at all. I think the angle was off compared to the prototype. Yeah, the prototype had a really long, gentle angle. Actually, it had, if I block off the bumper, there's only a fraction of the width of the entire trailer, and it looks like it went right to a point at the bottom, so it could just be a big triangle. if I did that, if I just did a triangle down to there, let's look at this prototype that I did. Yeah, something doesn't look quite right with this one, I always thought. And I assumed it was the door, and that might be a bit of it. But I bet it's those two chamfered edges. And this went down all the way to a point. It's really difficult to see in those pictures. Well, I guess there's one way to test out the idea, and that would be to make it. So I just want to cut this one to length. I noticed both edges weren't square, so I want to square up the cut, square up one end. Just a simple cut like that before I get the length. Length here. I don't like to draw when there's a line, one of these yellow lines right underneath. I like the contrast of the green and the white. So using the chiseled edge, just make a line right there. Make a mental note that I want to cut that line off. So using the parallel. The parallel is only because this blade has been pushed up a little bit, and thin pieces don't get cut all the way. Parallel is normally not needed for most of the time. Alright, so I'm trying not to make a habit of not working around sharp things if I need to. So it's an inch, as you can see here, it's an inch 200 thousandths. So if I center this up, it's going to be 600 thousandths on one end and 600 thousandths on the other. So I'm going to get this shape down here. And this, I find better scales actually have grooves cut. It's not a printed on surface. You can hear my fingernail skipping in there. So I can take the sharp edge of this and put it right in that 3 groove. And I kind of push that way, and I pull this way, and I get a V, and that's a perfect point of where the center is, at least in theory. If I want these edges to be the same thickness, but I actually want it to go down to nothing. So I'll just chamfer the whole edge off. I was going to draw a line here and then flip it over and then draw a line here so I could, line up the thickness that I want to save. But I'm going to go right to that corner. We'll see how that works. I've got just a scrap piece. It doesn't have to be any particular size, shape. It just has to have one straight edge and easy to hold down. And a neat thing about this, using this little clamp thing, is I can use it to hold down a bit of styrene if it was the right shape. But that's what these little pieces are for. Instead, I'm just going to anchor one edge right to that, and I'm just going to angle this. I'll pivot that around until I have my center point on this cut line and I have this edge on that cut line. And I don't want this to stick out into where I'm going to cut. So I actually have to rotate this a bit. So I have this line lined up here, and that line almost lined up there. So I'm going to pivot this down a little bit. Now I'll just try to eyeball it. Now I just have the blade resting on the plastic. I'm not cutting yet. I can see I'm off just a little bit with this point. So I'm going to adjust it. See if I push that down that way. Careful not to cut my finger. I think that's nice like that. And if I just make a line right there, I guess that doesn't help because I don't have a center line on this side. I'll just push that down to the end. It's a little bit too far. And I realize I can't hold this down as nice as I'd like. So I'll pull that back a bit. And just to give a little bit of weight. And then, okay, I've got that corner. And it's got a little bit of a flat spot there, which I'm okay with. It's not much, so I don't think it'll be a problem. So now I have that triangular shape, entire width, but a much bigger angle. Now, it doesn't look the same because all these lights are in this whole bumper, where in this the whole bumpers that I'm making is going to be below this lip, so it's not going to be exact. Let's see if this bumper, yeah, it does, it hides that brass loop, or at least it will when I'm done with it. Okay, that's not bad. Now what I'm going to want to do is I need a hole in this bumper. So it just so happens that this thin styrene can fit right there. And if I center these two little wings up, if it's equally spaced, even if it's at an angle, as long as they're both the same distance from the sides, it'll work. Back that up, and using the straight edge of the bevel, the unbeveled edge. You see I'm rotating the pencil around to keep that sharp point right up against the edge of the wire, so that way it's a perfect inside diameter size. So when I put that there, that's where that goes. Now I want to make sure that's big enough for a spike head. Yeah, just barely. I might have to couple these, put it in that way. But that's how low I want to go at the very least. And I can always make it a little bit bigger. I'm going to make this a square hole. So just freehand, making multiple passes. If there wasn't a camera up here, I can get my head right down on top, but if I do that, then you won't be able to see what I'm doing. And I probably should have blocked this view from you because this is not going very well at all. Okay, I'm going to put this off to the side and get my head in the way. Let's try a little different way. I'm going to use the knife to drill a hole. And it's not just putting the knife and spinning it. That doesn't work really well, I've found. Or at least this way works better. So if you get it started, you can certainly drill a hole like this, but I find if you lean the blade over and either rotate the piece like I'm doing here, or if you kind of do this and wobble it around, you get a much nicer chip off the tip of the blade than you do if you just kind of drill the knife into the hole. Let's say they both work. Let's see, this is more of a scraping action. It scrapes the hole because the cutting edge is perpendicular, or because it's a blade with an angle on it, it's slightly dragging. But if you lean it back this way, as you wobble the cut, see that knife edge is always cutting the plastic. So depending on what you're trying to accomplish, there's two different ways. This is kind of difficult to hold. I want to cut through here, but I don't want to drill a hole into the mat. I have a piece of soft wood here. It's probably just a pine block. And it's pretty soft, so it shouldn't hurt the tip of the blade. I kind of want to work the hole this way a little bit more, so I'm cutting more on this side. But once I get that hole established, then I can start nibbling out the square a little bit easier. This is by no means the best way to do something, to do this particular task, but I'm just here to show you that even the wrong way can still work. And even if it doesn't work, then I can always try it again. I did it once, I can do it again, and I can do it again better than the first time. Now I'd like to try not to cut, even though this line represents the inside diameter of that brass wire, I want to keep it from there as much as possible. So the more I can hide that brass wire, the better. So it'll be painted flat black, and that will disguise it to some degree. But if it's not visible at all, then I think that's probably the best way. Then you don't have anything to disguise. Now, it's pretty good. That's way too small. But I just want to check the progress, make sure it looks about right. Now this isn't glued in here, so I can move it up and down. I can even drill it deeper But what I'm really going for, I guess, is this hole to be centered. So it is a bit low. He's sometimes having all these extra layout lines. It throws off your perception of where that hole is. So if you flip it over to a blank side, and you can clearly see there's more material down there, it's not centered. But to me, like, that looks kind of centered. So I'm going to cut down to the pencil line after I just said I didn't want to. It's all about adapting to what has to happen. Just making it up as I go. The best way is to have a plan ahead of time and actually mentally go through all the steps. At the very least, I like to sketch the steps out if possible, so I could really visualize it better and so I don't forget what I'm doing. Yeah, that's much more centered. I'm just going to work from this side, because that could come down a little bit, but these sides need to be widened a bit. And it looks like that flat spot is kind of pushed over on this side a little bit more. I just want to make a little bit of a stop cut. I'm not pressing hard, so if it comes out, it doesn't gouge my finger. And this, with a sharp blade, I can trim off very little amounts. And this blade doesn't really seem to be that sharp right now. Let's see if I can change the position of this and get a better view. This is all just to make this square hole so the a spike head can fit in there and hook onto that loop. And that's about right, but you see it doesn't fit in the bumper. The little protrusion on the coupler there doesn't fit in there. So I want to keep working this square hole until this round peg can fit into it. It'd be nice if I had a square punch that I could just pop this hole out with. And I could make one, grind down a knife like this and just pop it out. Because I'm only going to do a few of these, I don't think it's worth putting time and energy into creating a specific tool. On the other hand, if I already have one, I'll take this cheap set. Yeah, there's no... I was hoping for a width, like at least a flat blade like that, and it was narrower, and I could just press down. So, nothing there. Okay. It's worth a shot. So it's continuing to try to enlarge this square hole a little bit. It's making a stop cut there. Kind of pushing that down, peeling this away. Cut that back there. Work on the green so I can see the contrast between the plastic. That's still too small, but it's getting there. Try to keep this hole, the square hole, centered just by working a little bit more on one side than on the other. I'm just pushing straight down to make these cuts, not pulling. whenever you wipe a blade, make sure you're always wiping down, not up the edge. It sounds kind of obvious, but I've done it a couple of times. You just you don't want to really wipe parallel to it either, parallel to this edge, parallel to that edge. So I always try to approach the knife in this way, so my fingers only go that far and they go away from. So it looks like I'm rubbing my fingers on the blade, but I'm not. I'm very consciously running them away from the cutting edge. So that is definitely not square, but it's getting there. You know what I do have? That might not work that well. I think I have a square file, like a tapered square file. It's one of these. Here's a square one. So this being square, see, dirty tool. You clean this off real quick. Okay, if this plastic wasn't so thin, I can probably just use this file and file a square hole. But what I'm going to use now is, see, it doesn't work very well. But if I can work this corner, then I can work this corner, and I can do that just to square up the hole. I can square up the corners, and then when the corners are square, that's pretty square, and I can use the shape of the file itself to see how big it is. See, it's wider than it is tall. So this isn't like a high quality file. As you can see, there's even chunks of metal in there when I was using it for other things. It's a little on the coarse side, I think. It's not too bad. But if it was a better quality file, I think I'd be able to do this better, with better results. But by taking light cuts, I can get okay results. I hope. At least it's more of a square shape. Kind of guarantees that it's going to be square. It doesn't quite fit. I don't know if this is going to be a good idea to do it this way. To make the square hole fit that round tube. Not just because you're putting a round tube in a square hole, but it's going to make this really narrow. The top and bottom of the bumper of the hole. It's not going to be very strong. Might be okay. Gotta cut into that corner. That's a little bit better. It looks wise. Instead of using the Roadrailer that I have, I should probably just get the tube that I used originally for this. Well, that's getting real close. But man, it's that last 10 thousandths that is just tough. Cut that down there. just broke it. No. Well, this is styrene, so I will be able to glue it back. See, what happened, I believe, is when the knife went through, there wasn't enough space for this little piece of scrap to move out of the way. And because the scrap and this strip are about the same size, one had to give way, and it did. Well, maybe I could still salvage this. At least it was a nice clean cut. So I might be able just to glue it back together. Then hopefully any paint will fill in that tiny little gap and won't be noticeable. And it won't look broken. It's close. I think this width now needs to come down. So I'm gonna try something new here. Just kind of whittle away at this very lightly, very carefully. For two reasons. One, I don't want to cut through another corner, because two, when I do that, it'll probably cut through my finger. So if I just use light motions, try to cut this out, maybe cut this a little bit deeper here. And again, if the camera wasn't here, I'd be looking a lot closer at this. Shooting video while doing this is new to me, and because it's new, it is kind of difficult. This one sticks out a little bit further. Oh man, that's so close. See, I think the thickness up and down is okay. It's just the size left and right. Yeah, see how when I put that knife blade through there, it pushed up that, because the knife has to make room. So it's a good idea to always have a piece of scrap that can flex away from the part you're cutting as a bit of a relief. Especially when it's really small, thin plastic like this. That opened up somewhat. Very, very close. Well, for the sake of speeding this along, no, I'm not going to speed this along. I'm going to take it nice and slow. I was going to cut this shot and then continue my whittling away, but I really want to try to do as much on camera as possible, because it's easy to follow directions if everything goes well, but if things don't go well, like if that breaks, then what do you do? Well, I want to capture all my mistakes as well as the things that I happen to get right. And I'm no genius I'm no master modeler. I think I just have average capabilities. So I want to show that if I can do this, you can too. Sometimes it's nice to watch someone else work on something and it